What happens when a 15-year-old black boy gives up his first-class seat for a tired elderly woman? And 5 minutes later, she hands him a note that turns his entire world upside down. Ellis Monroe thought it was just another flight, just another quiet trip back to Minneapolis after a school event. But a small act of kindness, offering his seat to a stranger, sets off a chain of revelations that forces him to question everything he's ever known about his past, his family, and his identity. Why did his mother tell him his father was dead? Why does this stranger know his name, and what truth has been hidden behind years of silence and love? This isn't just a story about a flight. It's a story about courage, lies, legacy, and the love we're sometimes too afraid to tell the truth for. So grab a seat, open your heart, and get ready for a journey that begins with a simple gesture and ends with a truth that will shake you. If this story touches you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin. The first thing Ellis Monroe noticed when he boarded BlueHarbor Air Flight 4291 was how quiet first class felt. The seats were wide, the lighting soft, and everything smelled faintly of citrus and leather. It felt like a different world from the crowded gate he had just walked through. He held his boarding pass in one hand and a half-zipped hoodie in the other. Row 2. Seat A, window. He moved carefully, not wanting to knock over any briefcases or coffee cups. A man in a gray suit gave him a polite nod as he passed. Another woman, maybe in her 40s, looked him up and down like she was trying to decide if he belonged there. Ellis kept his face neutral. He'd practiced that look for years. He was only 15, but tall for his age, quiet, serious, and already used to the feeling of being somewhere people didn't expect him to be. His mom called it presence. His teachers called it maturity. Most strangers just called it surprising. He eased into his seat and looked out the window. The Minneapolis tarmac shimmered under the afternoon sun. Flight 4291 to Charlotte. 3 hours. He could manage that. He pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. He wasn't texting anyone. He was writing a story. Something he did when the world felt too loud. His mom called it his escape hatch. She wasn't wrong. "Excuse me, sir. Is this seat taken?" The voice came from behind him, soft but strained. Ellis turned. A woman stood there gripping the seat back in front of him. She wore a long navy coat, pearl earrings, and had silver hair pulled back into a twist. Her hand trembled slightly where it clutched her cane. She didn't look well. Ellis blinked. She was clearly confused. "This is 2A," he said gently. "Are you looking for a different row?" She hesitated, glancing at her ticket, then back at him. "Oh, dear. Yes. I suppose I must be mistaken. My seat's all the way in the back." There was something about the way she said it. Not frustration, not even resignation, just quiet exhaustion. The flight attendant walked by, pausing when she noticed the exchange. "Ma'am, your seat is in 27 Can I help you to the back?" Ellis looked at the woman again, the weight of her coat, the sag in her shoulders, the fragility in her eyes. He unbuckled his belt. "She can have my seat," he said, standing. The attendant blinked. "Sir, that's very generous, but it's not necessary." "I insist," Ellis replied. "Please, just tell me where 27C is." The woman tried to protest, but her voice cracked. He smiled at her and handed over his boarding pass without making a show of it. He picked up his backpack, nodded once, and turned toward the back of the plane before anyone could say another word. The walk to row 27 felt longer than it should have. The air felt denser back here. People were still fighting for overhead space. Kids were already arguing over window seats. and the energy was louder, messier. He slid into 27C, an aisle seat next to a tired mother holding a toddler and a teenage boy asleep against the window. Ellis folded his hoodie into a makeshift pillow and settled in, letting the hum of the cabin drown out his thoughts. It was only then, about 5 minutes later, as the seatbelt sign blinked on, that he noticed it. A small piece of paper, folded tightly, tucked into the front pouch of his hoodie. His name was written across the front in precise cursive. Ellis. He frowned, unfolded it. His breath caught. "I've been searching for you for 12 years. Your father is not dead. He's alive, and I can prove it." The words were clean, centered. No signature, no contact number, just the shock of them. His fingers went cold. For a second, he wasn't sure if he was breathing. He read it again, then again. It didn't make sense. His father had died when Ellis was 3. Car crash. No survivors. His mother had told him that over and over, gently but firmly. They didn't have a grave to visit. He'd asked once, and she said it had all happened out of state. Quick, tragic, closed casket. Ellis turned his head slowly, back toward the front of the plane. The curtains separating first class had already been drawn, but he could see a sliver of the woman's coat through the gap. She was watching him. Her eyes were bright, unwavering. She nodded once, not apologetically, not sadly, just knowingly. Ellis stared. His heart thudded in his chest like a warning. He tucked the note into his backpack without looking away. He didn't know what to think, or who to believe, but something had shifted. Something real. And whatever this flight was supposed to be before, it wasn't anymore. 48 hours earlier, Ellis Monroe sat in the third row of room 216 at Oak Ridge High, pretending to care about logarithmic functions. Mr. Latham was scribbling on the whiteboard with his usual overconfidence, his back to the class, talking fast like he had somewhere else to be. The room buzzed quietly with end-of-week energy. Backpacks were already half-zipped, pencils tapped, and outside the tall windows, the April sun made the parking lot shimmer with the promise of spring. Ellis was staring through the glass, not looking at anything in particular, just letting his thoughts drift far from math and numbers and mandatory graphing calculators. He was good at school. Always had been. He didn't cause trouble. He turned in his work. Teachers liked him, some too much. They called him focused, disciplined, gifted. They didn't know that most days. He was just trying to stay out of his own head. Ellis. The value of log base, 10 of 100. He blinked. Mr. Latham was staring at him expectantly. Ellis straightened slightly in his seat. 2, he said calmly. A few kids in the back chuckled. Latham gave a half smile and turned back to the board. Ellis exhaled and went back to spinning his pen slowly between his fingers. He wasn't bored. He just had too much on his mind. That morning, like so many mornings, his mom had already been gone when he got up. She was a trauma doctor at Northfield Regional, and lately, her shifts had stretched into dawn. They lived in a modest 2-story house tucked into a quiet block just outside Minneapolis. It was always clean, always quiet. His mother liked routines, structure, no mess, no chaos. She was careful about everything, especially her past. There was a photo in the hallway of Ellis as a toddler, sitting on the lap of a man he barely remembered. The man had a sharp jawline, warm eyes, and a wide smile that crinkled at the corners. His arms were wrapped around Ellis like he was holding something precious. That was his father, Isaiah Reed. The photo had no frame, just tucked into the edge of the mirror. No other photos of him anywhere. Ellis had asked about him once, when he was 9. His mother had sat him down, folded her hands neatly, and said his father had died in a car accident out of state. It had been quick, unexpected, and devastating. He remembered her exact words. "You were 3. You don't remember. And maybe that's a blessing." After that, she never brought it up again, and neither did he. The final bell rang, snapping Ellis back to the present. He stood, grabbed his backpack, and headed out into the crowded hallway, where conversations ricocheted between lockers and sneakers squeaked against the linoleum. "Yo, Ellis." Jalen Thomas jogged up beside him, wide grin, loud voice, the kind of person who was always full of movement. "You coming to Aiden's tonight? Everyone's gonna be there." Ellis raised an eyebrow. "His mom's out of town again." Jalen grinned. "Gone till Monday. It's open season." Ellis gave a half smile. "Can't. My mom's working overnight again. I promised I'd handle laundry and make sure I finished the scholarship essay." Jalen rolled his eyes. "Man, you're always on that grind. Come on. Just once. Live a little." Ellis shook his head. "Living a little gets people in trouble." Jalen clutched his heart like he'd been shot. "You wound me." Ellis laughed, then turned serious. "Text me if anything wild happens. I need material for the essay." They bumped fists and split off. Ellis walked home like always. 17 minutes from school to his front door. He liked the quiet, the way his mind slowed down when it was just him and the sound of gravel beneath his shoes. When he got home, the house was just as he'd left it. His mother's note was on the fridge. "Gone to ER. Emergency conference in Charlotte this weekend. You're flying Saturday to visit Uncle Raymond. Ticket on the table. Use miles upgrade if available. Pack light. Be good. Love you." Ellis read it twice. She hadn't mentioned anything about the trip earlier in the week, but that wasn't unusual. She moved through life like a checklist, efficient, focused, and sometimes distant. He found the printed boarding pass beside a $50 bill and a new TSA-approved luggage tag. Blue Harbor Air, Flight 4291, Minneapolis to Charlotte, Saturday, 2:15 p.m. First class seat, 2A. He blinked. That had to be a mistake. He checked the details, but it was printed right there. His name, his age, and the magic words, first class. He couldn't remember the last time he'd flown, and definitely not in first class. He walked upstairs to pack. Halfway through folding shirts, he paused. His mom's room was just across the hall. The door was ajar. He'd never snooped, not once. She trusted him. He respected that. But something felt different. He walked in slowly. The room was perfectly neat, bed made tight, a candle untouched, her black medical tote resting beside the dresser. He opened the top drawer and found exactly what he expected, a tidy row of folded documents, bills, and receipts. Then, tucked beneath a folder labeled tax returns, he saw something strange. A thick manila envelope stamped confidential, family court documents, state of North Carolina. His breath caught. He didn't open it. He just stared. His chest tightened, like something inside him was being pulled toward a truth he wasn't ready to confront. He closed the drawer. He would ask her. Later. Right now. He had a flight to pack for, and no idea that everything he believed about his life was about to change. The terminal at Minneapolis St. Paul International smelled faintly of coffee, jet fuel, and anxiety. Ellis Monroe moved through it with practiced ease, a small carry-on slung over his shoulder and a black hoodie tied around his waist. He had already passed through security, declined the offered snack mix, and now stood at Gate C-28 boarding pass in hand. Flight 4291 to Charlotte was on time. Clear skies. First-class ticket. He kept glancing down at the word printed neatly next to his name. 2A. It didn't feel real. First class was a place he'd only glimpsed on TV screens or in YouTube videos. Reclining seats, linen napkins, whispering attendants. For years, it had been the kind of luxury he never thought he'd touch. Yet here he was, boarding early, walking past the dividing curtain, feeling out of place in a space designed for someone else. The flight attendant greeted him warmly. She was young, with a smooth, polished tone and a name tag that read, Rachel. When she saw his age, her smile tightened for just a second before returning to default pleasantness. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Monroe. Can I help you with your bag?" "No, thanks," Ellis said. "I got it." She guided him to the window seat. Second row. Clean white leather. More leg room than he knew what to do with. He sank into the chair slowly, like someone trying not to wrinkle a tuxedo they hadn't paid for. Rachel offered him a bottle of water and a hot towel. Ellis accepted both. Unsure what else people did here, he took out his notebook and started doodling, pretending to look like he belonged. Minutes passed. Passengers filtered in, the rhythm of boarding filling the cabin like background noise. In the row ahead, a businessman barked into his phone about stock prices. Across the aisle, a woman sipped something from a glass mug, scrolling emails with one hand. Ellis kept his eyes on the tarmac, kept breathing. He was still getting used to how quiet first class felt. Then the energy shifted. The boarding line paused, then parted. As an older woman stepped into view, she wore a slate-gray coat that brushed her ankles and carried a small handbag looped over her wrist. Her silver hair was tucked into a soft bun, and she walked with a polished wooden cane, her movements careful but dignified. Ellis watched her scan the rows, then looked down at her ticket. She stepped into the aisle, standing just a few feet from his seat. A ripple of discomfort passed through the cabin. The passengers behind her grumbled quietly. A flight attendant moved toward her. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Let me help you find your seat." "I believe it's in the rear," she said softly, peering at the ticket again. Rachel checked the stub. "Yes, row 27. Would you like me to assist you back there?" The woman nodded faintly, her grip tightening on the cane. She took one slow step forward, then another. But her breathing had changed. It was shallow now, her shoulders tightening with every movement. Ellis stood up. "She can take my seat," he said, his voice steady. Rachel looked at him in surprise. "You don't have to do that, sir." "I know, but I want to." He offered the woman a gentle smile. "It's yours." She blinked at him, surprised. "Young man, this is a first-class seat. That's quite an offer." Ellis shrugged. "It's just a chair. You look like you need it more than I do." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, she touched his wrist. "Thank you. That's very kind." Rachel hesitated, then helped them exchange boarding passes. The woman gave her name as Geneva. She walked slowly to the seat, easing herself down with effort. As Ellis handed her the water bottle and adjusted the overhead air vent for her, she gave him a look he could not quite decipher. Deep and layered, like someone searching for something in his face. Then Just before he turned to walk to the back, she slipped something into his hand. It was small, folded, a piece of paper. She said nothing, just offered the smallest nod, then settled into the seat and closed her eyes as if preparing for a long sleep. Ellis stood still for half a second, then pocketed the note without reading it. He made his way toward the rear of the plane. Economy felt like another planet. Noisy, tight. A baby was already crying 2 rows behind him. A man with a large backpack bumped into him twice trying to adjust his carry-on. His assigned seat, 27C, was in the center between a college kid in headphones and an older woman knitting a green scarf. He slid in and buckled his seatbelt without complaint. The note was still in his pocket. He hadn't looked at it yet, but something about it was buzzing inside him. Not just curiosity, a weight, a strange sense of anticipation. The plane pulled back from the gate. The lights dimmed. The safety demo began. Ellis waited. When the wheels lifted off the ground and the cabin tilted gently upward into the sky, he finally unfolded the note. His name was written on the front. Ellis, in delicate, looping script. Inside, just one sentence. I've been searching for you for 12 years. Your father is not dead. He is alive, and I can prove it. His hand stilled. The cabin noise faded. He reread the words again and again. 12 years. Alive. Father. It didn't make sense. His mom had told him his father died in a car accident. No survivors. He remembered how calm she had been when she said it. How final. He stared at the note, trying to find any hint it was a joke, a mistake, a misunderstanding. But it was handwritten, specific, and it had his name. His chest tightened. He turned slightly in his seat. From this far back, he couldn't see through the curtain, couldn't see the woman in 2A. But he felt something shift inside him. It was like someone had opened a door he didn't know existed, one he couldn't close now. Ellis sat in seat 27C, the folded note trembling slightly in his hand. He read the words again, slower this time, his eyes moving deliberately over each line like they might change if he looked long enough. I've been searching for you for 12 years. Your father is not dead. He is alive. And I can prove it. 12 years. Not 10. Not 8. 12. That meant since he was 3 years old. Since the moment his mother had said those gentle, sorrowful words, he's gone. Baby, he's not coming back. Ellis stared at the seat back in front of him, eyes unfocused. He felt like he was floating outside his own body. The murmur of the plane, the crying toddler 2 rows behind, the scratchy hum of someone's earbuds leaking music beside him. It all blurred into a dull haze. He read the note one more time, then slowly folded it and slid it into the inner pocket of his backpack. His hands weren't shaking anymore, but the stillness inside him was worse somehow. Like his whole life had suddenly been built on sand. What if it was true? What if his father hadn't died? He took a deep breath and tried to reason it out. It could be a mistake. Maybe Geneva had him confused with someone else. Maybe the name Ellis meant something different to her. But then why write the note so carefully, so directly? Why the way she looked at him, like she knew exactly who he was? He glanced up toward the front of the cabin, but the thick curtain separating first class from the rest of the plane was tightly drawn. No way to see through. He considered getting up, asking the flight attendants if he could speak with her again. But how would he explain it? How would he even begin? Excuse me. I gave up my seat, and the woman who took it just told me my dad might still be alive. It sounded insane, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. Not completely. He leaned back against the seat and closed his eyes. A memory flickered. He was maybe 6 or 7, sitting on the hallway carpet outside his mom's room. She didn't know he was there. He could hear her talking quietly on the phone. Not her usual clipped hospital tone. Softer. Shaken. I did what was best for him. You know I did. He deserves a life without all of this. The call ended with silence and the soft creak of her dresser drawer closing. At the time, he thought she was talking about the hospital, about some patient. But what if she hadn't been? What if she was talking about him? Ellis opened his eyes. The edges of the cabin felt sharper now, more in focus. He could hear the click of silverware on ceramic from the galley, the gentle vibration of the engine. He took out his notebook and flipped to a blank page. He didn't know why, but writing made things clearer. He didn't write anything poetic, just a list. Things I know. My mom said Dad died in a car crash. There was no funeral, no grave, one photo in the hallway, no others. She never talks about him. The woman in 2A called him alive. She said she's been looking for me. He stared at the list, then added, I never asked more. I just accepted it. That last line burned in his chest. Ellis had always been careful, always respectful. His mother carried so much already. The night shifts, the bills, the unspoken ache she wore in her eyes. Some mornings when she didn't know he was watching. He had learned not to ask too many questions, not to add weight to her shoulders. But now the questions were clawing their way to the surface. The seatbelt sign chimed softly overhead. A voice announced mild turbulence ahead. He looked down and realized his knuckles were white around his pen. Breathe, Ellis. The plane jolted slightly. Nothing serious. A few passengers flinched. The college student next to him didn't even lift his head. Ellis turned and looked out the window. Clouds drifted below them like cotton stretched across the sky. How do you prepare for a world where everything you believed about your family might be wrong? How do you trust anything after that? He thought about his mom, her long shifts, the way she always seemed tired, but pushed forward anyway. The nights she would sit at the kitchen table filling out forms by hand, biting the inside of her cheek, not realizing he was watching from the stairs. She wasn't a liar. She couldn't be. Could she? His chest ached. He unzipped the front pouch of his bag and gently pulled out the envelope Geneva had slipped him. There was a small tear on one edge now. His thumb traced the crease of the fold. Should he open it again? Should he wait before he could decide? A new voice interrupted. You good? Man, Ellis turned. The student beside him had finally taken out his earbuds. I saw you switch seats earlier. That was solid of you, he said, nodding. Not a lot of people would do that. Ellis offered a thin smile. She looked like she needed it. The guy chuckled. No kidding. She looked like she was about to pass out. You a student? Yeah. High school. Whoa. I figured college. You carry yourself different. Ellis didn't reply. His mind was still wrapped around another sentence. Your father is not dead. He excused himself and made his way down the aisle to the bathroom, not because he needed it, but because he needed a moment to breathe. Inside the cramped cabin, he locked the door and leaned against the sink. His reflection stared back at him, eyebrows furrowed. His father's eyes, his mother once said, kind and sharp at the same time. He splashed water on his face, then reached for his phone. He hesitated. Then he opened his photo album and scrolled to the old picture of him sitting on his father's lap, The only one. The man's smile was wide. His arms were wrapped around Ellis like the world outside didn't matter. Ellis stared at the image for a long time, and slowly, something inside him whispered, "Find the truth." Ellis stood outside the airplane bathroom, staring down the aisle toward the front of the plane. The curtain that separated first class seemed thinner now, not physically, but emotionally. It was no longer a boundary of class or comfort. It was a veil between two versions of reality. Behind that curtain sat Geneva Reed, the woman who had slipped him a note that shattered everything he thought he knew about his family. He took a breath and started walking. The flight attendants were quietly rearranging trays in the galley near the curtain. When Ellis reached them, one of them, Rachel, noticed and gave him a gentle smile. "Back again. You doing okay?" Ellis hesitated, then nodded. "I just wanted to check on the woman in 2A. Make sure she's okay." Rachel tilted her head slightly. "That's very thoughtful. She's resting now. Had a warm tea earlier. Asked for a blanket. Seems fine. Why is there something else you needed?" He shifted his weight. "Could I speak with her?" "Just for a minute." Rachel paused. She glanced toward the front, then back at Ellis. "You related?" Ellis hesitated. "No," he said, "but I think she knows something important. About my father." That sentence settled in the air between them like a pebble dropped into still water. The attendant's smile faded slightly. She studied his face for a moment, then stepped aside. "I'll ask if she's awake." Ellis waited. Rachel pulled the curtain aside quietly and leaned in. A hushed exchange followed. Geneva's voice, soft but firm. A brief nod. Then Rachel turned and waved Ellis forward. The first-class cabin was quieter than ever. Geneva was sitting upright now, a thin blanket draped over her legs. She looked older than before, more fragile in the light, but her eyes were sharp, clear, focused. She gestured to the seat beside her. Ellis sat down. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The hum of the engine filled the silence. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Geneva said finally, her voice like paper brushing velvet. Ellis kept his eyes on her. "Why did you write that note?" Geneva studied him. "Because it was time. You said you've been looking for me for 12 years. She nodded. "That's right." Why, a long breath left her chest. She looked down at her hands folded over her lap, then back up. "Because I made a promise," she said, "to your father and to myself." Ellis blinked. "So you knew him?" "I'm his mother," she said simply. The world tilted again. Geneva Reed, his grandmother. Ellis leaned back slightly, trying to process that. "My father, his name was Isaiah Reed," he said carefully. "Yes, he died when I was 3. "No," Geneva said, her voice soft but unwavering. "He didn't." Ellis felt his pulse quicken. "My mother said it was a car accident. No survivors." Geneva shook her head. "That's what she told you, but it's not what happened." His chest tightened. "Then what did happen?" Geneva reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. She handed it to him. Inside were 3 things: a photocopy of a birth certificate, a court order dated 12 years ago, and a letter, folded, handwritten. The name at the top read Isaiah Reed. Ellis held it, staring. He didn't open it yet. He looked up at Geneva. Why would she lie? Why would my mother do that? Geneva's expression softened. "That's not a question I can answer easily, but I'll try." She leaned forward, her voice low but clear. "Your father and mother loved each other once, deeply. They had plans, dreams, the kind of love people write about. But your father, He got involved in something bigger than himself. He was working as a civil rights attorney in North Carolina. Took on a case involving police corruption. It became dangerous. Ellis listened, not moving. Then one night, there was an ambush. He wasn't the target, but he was caught in it. There were threats, anonymous calls, warnings that if he didn't disappear, you and your mother would be next. Ellis's mouth went dry, so he faked his death. Geneva nodded. With help. Friends in the legal system. The plan was to protect you both, to go into hiding. But your mother, she made a different choice. What kind of choice? She thought the only way to protect you was to cut ties. Entirely. She took you and vanished, changed states, new job, new life, left everything behind, including him. Ellis's thoughts spiraled. So all this time, he's been alive somewhere. Geneva nodded. Yes, he's been living quietly. No public contact. No digital footprint. But he never stopped asking about you. I never stopped looking. I only found you 3 months ago. Ellis swallowed hard. His mother had always seemed cautious, private. But this... He tried to picture her doing something like that. Walking away from someone she loved. Choosing to carry a lie for over a decade. Where is he now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. In Charlotte, Geneva said, waiting, hoping. The cabin seemed smaller now, the air heavier. Ellis looked down at the letter in his hands. He wanted to open it, wanted to know everything, but a part of him was afraid too, afraid that reading it would make everything real, that it would change the way he saw his mother, forever. Geneva seemed to sense it. You don't have to decide anything now, she said gently. I just wanted you to know the truth. What you do with it is up to you. He nodded slowly. Then finally, he spoke. Why now? Geneva looked at him, eyes shining. Because you're old enough to carry the truth, and because lies may protect people from pain, but they also steal the chance to heal. Ellis Monroe sat frozen in seat 2B, the envelope from Geneva still clutched in his hands. He hadn't moved in minutes. Outside the aircraft, the clouds drifted like soft cotton valleys, stretching across the vast sky below them. But inside him, the silence was dense, the kind that follows an earthquake, the kind where everything familiar lies cracked and rearranged. The letter from his father rested on his lap, thin, folded, handwritten. The edges were worn, like it had been touched 1,000 times before ever reaching him. He ran his fingers over the fold. It felt like trespassing. He had never heard his father's voice, never seen a video of him. And now this paper was his first real message, not filtered through memory, not diluted by stories. Just him, Isaiah Reed, in his own words. Ellis opened it. The ink had faded a little, but the handwriting was precise, elegant, a strong hand trying to stay steady. My son, if you are reading this, then somehow mercy found its way through the walls between us. And if you're anything like I imagine you to be, you're probably reading this with a mix of confusion, anger, and maybe something deeper, something that's hard to name. Ellis blinked. The words hit harder than he expected. I won't lie to you. I failed, not in loving you, because I never stopped, but in protecting you, in protecting your mother. When I disappeared, it wasn't because I didn't want to be your father. It was because someone made it clear that if I didn't vanish, you might grow up without either of us. Ellis looked up briefly. Geneva was sitting quietly beside him, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't interrupt. She just let him read. I watched you grow up from the shadows. Not often, not enough, but your grandmother found ways to show me glimpses. Your kindergarten photo with the blue sweater, a picture from your middle school science fair. I kept them all. I memorized your face in every stage. I missed your first words, your scraped knees, your birthdays, and I carry that weight every single day. Ellis felt a strange warmth at the back of his throat. His eyes burned. I don't know what your mother told you about me. I can only imagine it was what she thought would keep you safe. She loved me once. I know that. And she loves you more than anything in this world. If she hurt you by hiding the truth, I ask you try not to hate her. She made an impossible choice. I can't say I would have done differently. But now, you deserve the whole story. The paper shook a little in Ellis's hands. I want you to know who you are. You come from a long line of fighters, not always warriors in the battlefield sense, but people who knew how to keep standing when the world tried to bend them. You're part of that. Even if you never met me, my blood runs in your spine, and I'm proud of the man I believe you are becoming. Ellis closed his eyes. Proud. That word wrapped itself around his ribs like a weight and a lifeline. He had spent years chasing quiet praise from teachers, quiet nods from his mother, quiet grades on his report card. But this felt like a door unlocking inside his chest. I'm writing this not just because I want to see you, but because I want to know you. Not the headlines, not your school records. I want to know how you laugh, what scares you, what dreams you carry when no one's looking. I want to know your mind, your heart, if you'll let me. The page ended with 4 final lines, scrawled a bit messier than the rest. You have every right to walk away, but if you don't, I'll be waiting. Dad Ellis stared at the signature. 3 letters. Dad. He had never seen it written down like that before. He folded the letter slowly and pressed it against his chest, eyes shut tight. I didn't expect it to hit like that, he whispered. Geneva looked at him, her voice low and steady. I've read that letter maybe 50 times. He rewrote it so many times, trying to get it right. In the end, he told me, just give him the version where I speak straight from my regret. Ellis kept his gaze forward. He sounds like someone I would have wanted to know. You still can, she said softly. He nodded, but his voice cracked when he spoke again. I don't know how to forgive her. My mom. Geneva didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small cloth handkerchief. She handed it to him without a word. Ellis wiped his eyes and laughed once under his breath. Guess I'm crying in first class now. Geneva smiled gently. You're not the first, sweetheart. A silence passed, comfortable this time. Then Ellis turned to her. What happens when we land? She hesitated. That's up to you. We don't have to rush. But Isaiah's waiting. He doesn't even know you're on the plane. Ellis blinked. He's at the airport. He's supposed to pick me up. He thinks I'm coming alone. The words settled slowly in his mind. He could walk off this plane and come face to face with a man he thought was dead. A man who had written him a letter full of sorrow and hope. A man whose voice he had never heard, whose hands he couldn't remember holding. His stomach turned with nerves. What do I even say? He whispered. Geneva placed her hand lightly over his. You say whatever is in your heart, and if nothing comes, just let him see your face. That will be enough. Ellis looked down at the folded letter again. There was no blueprint for moments like this, no preparation guide, just the ache of loss, the hope of reunion, and the slow unwinding of a life he thought he understood. And now, just ahead, Charlotte, North Carolina, a new truth waiting at the gate. The captain's voice came over the speakers, soft and professional. Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into Charlotte Douglas International Airport. Please ensure your seat backs and tray tables are in their upright position. We'll be on the ground in approximately 20 minutes. Ellis Monroe barely heard it. He sat silently in 2B, his hands folded in his lap, the letter from his father tucked neatly inside his backpack now. Outside the window, the clouds had begun to thin, revealing the early sprawl of the city below. Charlotte looked smaller than he'd imagined. For a place that might hold the biggest turning point of his life, it almost seemed too normal. Geneva sat beside him, resting her eyes. She hadn't said much since their last conversation, letting the quiet stretch comfortably between them. Ellis appreciated that. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She simply gave space, something very few adults in his life had mastered. The hum of the aircraft felt louder now, as if it mirrored the sound inside his chest. He closed his eyes. His thoughts drifted to his mother, Dr. Simone Monroe. She was probably midway through her shift back in Minneapolis, pacing sterile hallways, her white coat fluttering behind her. Maybe she was comforting a patient's family. Maybe she was sipping black coffee in the break room, unaware that her son was about to walk into the past she had tried to bury. He could hear her voice in his head. I did what I had to do. But did she? Had she ever considered what it would do to him when the truth eventually surfaced? Ellis clenched his hands briefly. He didn't want to hate her. He didn't even want to be angry, but he couldn't pretend he wasn't hurt. There had been so many quiet moments between them that now felt like silence built on omission. All the times he had asked small questions about his father and received only tight smiles or a change of subject. All the birthdays with just the two of them. The father-son school events he had politely declined. Now those missing pieces screamed. The plane began to lower through patches of wind, and his ears popped gently. The cabin lights dimmed a little. Flight attendants moved through, checking seat belts and overhead bins. Geneva turned slightly toward him. You don't have to do anything. Ellis, not today, not even tomorrow. He nodded, grateful. I know. But if you choose to, he'll be there. Not expecting. Just hoping. Ellis glanced toward the curtain at the front of first class. It was open now, revealing the narrow hallway leading to the jet bridge. He imagined the terminal, the strangers rushing past, the glass walls, and one man, standing apart, looking for the woman he hadn't seen in months, not knowing that someone else would be walking toward him. I don't know what I'm going to say, Ellis admitted. Geneva smiled faintly. That makes two of you. He took a breath and looked out the window again. The plane tilted slightly, preparing for final approach. The landing gear thudded into place beneath them, and the engines whirred lower. Everything in him felt alert, on edge, but not in fear, in readiness. The descent was smooth. The city grew larger in the window. Roads, neighborhoods, glimpses of tiny cars and buildings. He found himself picturing Isaiah Reed. Would he recognize him? Would he cry? Would he be disappointed? Would he be proud? Ellis pulled the hoodie from his waist and slipped it on. He didn't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe he just needed something to wrap around himself, a kind of armor. The wheels touched down with a soft bounce. The cabin shook gently. Brakes engaged. A rush of air and low chatter rippled through the rows. They had landed. For a moment. Ellis stayed still. The announcement came, "Welcome to Charlotte. Local time 4:17 p.m. Weather partly sunny. 71 degrees. People unbuckled their seatbelts. Phones turned on. The man across the aisle was already texting, but Ellis stayed seated. He felt something different now, not just nerves. A quiet current rising beneath his ribs, the weight of a choice. He looked at Geneva. "I want to see him," he said. She reached for his hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "He's just outside baggage claim, by the window, near the welcome sign. He likes to stand where people arrive. Says it feels like hope." Ellis stood. His legs felt steady. His heart, less so. But that was okay. The aisle was full of people now, shuffling bags, stretching limbs. But somehow, the noise felt far away. Ellis moved with calm certainty. He slung his backpack over one shoulder, tucked his hands in the front pocket of his hoodie, and waited until Geneva had gathered her purse. They walked out together, down the narrow jet bridge, step by step toward something fragile, untested, and sacred. He didn't know what would happen. He only knew this. He needed to see the man who wrote that letter. He needed to decide for himself what came next. The airport terminal buzzed with movement. Roller bags glided across glossy floors. Announcements echoed faintly through the high ceilings. Families reunited with tearful hugs while tired business travelers walked with purpose. Everyone was going somewhere. Everyone had a reason. Ellis Monroe walked slowly beside Geneva, the letter from his father tucked inside the small notebook in his backpack. The terminal lights felt overly bright. His steps felt heavy with each passing second. He wasn't sure what he was expecting. A swell of music. Some cinematic pause in the crowd as their eyes met. Instead, everything around him continued exactly as it was. The world didn't stop just because his had. Geneva had said Isaiah always stood near the welcome sign. Gate 12 just past the newsstand. He likes the quiet there. Says it gives people room to breathe. They passed a food court, a woman singing softly to her baby, and a group of teens laughing loudly around a phone. It all blurred into the background. Ellis's focus narrowed. Then she stopped walking. "There," Geneva said softly, nodding ahead. Ellis followed her gaze. A man stood just beyond the security ropes, a bit apart from the crowd, mid-40s, tall, with shoulders that carried both strength and history. He wore a simple gray jacket and black slacks. His hands were clasped in front of him. His eyes scanned the arrivals gently, as if searching without panic, a practiced kind of patience. Ellis slowed. His breath caught somewhere between his ribs. The man shifted, and then their eyes met. At first, Isaiah Reed didn't move. His expression didn't change, but his posture did, subtly. The stillness of someone who had rehearsed this moment countless times, yet wasn't prepared when it finally arrived. Ellis froze, a dozen steps still between them, yet everything inside him surged forward. Isaiah's mouth parted slightly. His eyes watered, not dramatically, just enough to glisten. Then Geneva placed a gentle hand on Ellis's back. "Go." Ellis stepped forward, one pace, then another. He didn't know what to say. Isaiah took a slow breath and walked toward him, closing the gap. When they were a few feet apart, neither moved. Up close, Isaiah looked older than the photo Ellis had found years ago in a dusty drawer. There were lines around his mouth, a slight limp in his stance, and a deep quiet in his eyes. Not silence from distance, but silence shaped by decades of waiting. "You're taller than I thought you'd be," Isaiah said softly. Ellis gave a faint nod. "You're realer than I thought you'd be." They both gave a nervous, short laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because they didn't know what else to do with the storm inside them. "I read your letter," Ellis said. Isaiah's voice cracked. "Then I have nothing left to say. Unless you want me to." Ellis looked down, then back up. "I don't know what to feel right now." "That's fair," Isaiah said. "I don't either." Another pause. Then, without fanfare, Ellis reached into his backpack and pulled out the folded letter. He didn't hand it over. He just held it, as if to say, "This matters to me." Isaiah's eyes softened. "I wrote that the way I've imagined talking to you 100 times in my head. I never knew if I'd get it right." Ellis looked at him directly. "You got parts of it right. Some of it scared me. Some of it helped." Isaiah nodded, visibly holding back emotion. "Do you want to sit?" They found an empty bench by the window overlooking the airfield. Geneva gave them space, lingering just far enough to offer quiet support. From their seats, planes taxied slowly along the runways, their engines humming low against the glass. Ellis spoke first. "What happened to you after you left?" Isaiah folded his hands. "I worked construction under a different name for a while. Then advocacy work. Nothing flashy. Just writing briefs, helping local organizers. I kept my head down." "You never tried to find me." "I did," Isaiah said quickly. "Every year on your birthday. Every time I thought I saw someone who might be you. But your mother, she made it impossible. Changed everything. Moved without warning. I had no legal grounds, no trail. I begged Geneva to keep looking." Ellis's jaw tightened. "So she knew all this time?" "Yes, and she respected Simone's choice, even when it broke her heart." The mention of his mother brought a fresh wave of emotion. Ellis looked away. "I don't know how I'm supposed to forgive her," he said quietly. Isaiah didn't push. "You're not yet. Forgiveness is a long road, son. Sometimes it begins with just choosing to keep walking toward it." Ellis blinked hard. "Don't call me that. Not yet." Isaiah nodded slowly. Understood. A long silence stretched between them. Not empty, not uncomfortable, just weighty. Then Ellis asked something he hadn't planned to. "Why didn't you fight harder to stay?" Isaiah looked down at his hands, then back up. "I did. I fought in court. I tried everything I could until it risked exposing you both again. The threats weren't idle. They had names, files, leverage. I had to make a choice, and I chose your safety over my presence. I hated myself for it every day after." Ellis let that sit for a moment. Then he asked, "Did you ever stop loving her?" Isaiah's eyes grew distant. "No," he said, "but love can't always survive silence. Sometimes it has to let go." Ellis exhaled slowly. They watched a plane lift off into the sky. Then Isaiah turned to him again. "May I ask you something?" Ellis nodded. "What do you want from me?" "From this?" It wasn't a demand, just an invitation. Ellis thought carefully. His voice, when it came, was quiet but clear. "I don't want a second childhood. I don't want to pretend like nothing happened." Isaiah nodded. "Of course, but I want the truth. I want to know the parts of my life that were stolen, and I want to know who you are now." Isaiah swallowed. "That I can give you. All of it." Ellis looked at him one more time. "I'm not ready to call you Dad." Isaiah smiled. Not with disappointment, but with relief. "Then I'll earn it, however long it takes." They sat together, silent again. But this time, there was something like peace settling between them. Not resolution, but beginning. The motel room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and air conditioning. The lights were dim, the kind of soft yellow that barely reached the corners. Geneva had gone downstairs to give them privacy. Isaiah had stepped out onto the covered balcony with a coffee and a quiet request to give Ellis space. So now Ellis sat alone on the bed, his phone in his hand, screen glowing. He stared at the contact. Mom. His thumb hovered over it for what felt like hours. There had been times in his life when just hearing her voice could calm him instantly. Late-night fevers, back-to-school nerves, the anxiety before basketball tryouts. Simone Monroe had always sounded steady, even when the world wasn't. But right now, the thought of calling her made his stomach knot so tightly he could barely breathe. Still, he tapped the screen. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then her voice came through. Ellis. Her tone was bright, relieved, familiar. Hey, baby. Are you on the ground? He didn't respond right away. Just hearing her say his name made his throat close. Ellis? Yeah, he said finally. I'm here. There was a pause. He could hear the subtle click of her moving, maybe stepping away from a nurse's station. You okay? She asked. Your voice sounds different. I met someone on the plane, he said, his voice calm but cold. A beat of silence. Okay, she said carefully. Who Geneva Reed? Long pause. I see, Simone said. Ellis sat up straighter. His hand tightened around the phone. No, I don't think you do. Because if you did, you would have told me she was my grandmother a long time ago. Her silence wasn't surprised. It was deliberate. Ellis, she said softly, let me explain. I don't want the version you've practiced in your head. He cut in, his voice rising. I want the truth. The whole truth. Why did you lie to me about my father for 12 years? Another long silence. I did what I had to do to protect you, Simone said. He laughed, a bitter sound. Protect me from what? From a man who wrote me letters and remembered my birthday. From someone who wanted to be in my life. You don't know the whole story, she said, a little more urgently now. There were threats, legal issues. I didn't just make this up. You could have told me he was alive, Ellis said. At any point. You could have told me I had a grandmother, a name, a story, but you didn't. You left me with nothing. His voice cracked then, just a little, enough for the pain to slip through. I sat through school events while other kids had dads in the front row. You just told me mine was dead, like it was easier that way. I didn't do it because it was easy, Simone said quietly. I did it because I couldn't risk what might happen if I brought him back into our lives. You were 3. You don't remember the fear, the calls, the people outside our apartment watching. Then tell me about it now, Ellis said, softer this time. Don't hide behind protection. Don't treat me like I'm still a child. Tell me the truth. Simone sighed heavily. He imagined her sitting down, pinching the bridge of her nose like she always did when something hurt too much to say. Isaiah got in deep with a case that went beyond local corruption. Federal agents were involved. Witnesses vanished. There were people in power who wanted him silenced, and when they realized he had a family, everything changed. Why didn't you both go into hiding together? Because I didn't trust the people offering protection. I thought if I disappeared with you, they'd stop looking. I thought I was being smart. I thought, maybe if I said he died, they'd believe it. Ellis let that settle. And what about after he asked? After it was safe, after years had passed. Why still lie? I didn't know how to undo it, Simone whispered. The lie got so big. Every year I told myself I'd tell you the next birthday, the next holiday, but time kept slipping, and you looked so happy, so strong. I thought maybe you didn't need him. Ellis felt tears building in his eyes. He wasn't angry now, just sad. I needed the truth, he said, even when I didn't know it. There was no response for a moment. Then Simone's voice returned, smaller than he'd ever heard it. I'm sorry. Ellis, I know that's not enough. I don't expect you to forgive me right now. But I love you. Always. That never changed. He stared at the floor. I believe that, he said quietly. But it doesn't erase the hole you left. The other end of the line was silent again. Then Simone asked something soft and hesitant. Did you see him? Ellis nodded before realizing she couldn't see him. Yeah, he said. We met at the airport. How was it? He paused. It was real. Messy. Quiet. He didn't try to win me over. He just showed up and listened. Simone exhaled shakily. That sounds like him. Ellis wiped his face with the sleeve of his hoodie. I'm going to spend a little time here, just to figure things out. I understand, she said. Do you want me to come down? He thought about it, about seeing her face after this phone call, about whether he was ready. Not yet. He said, I need space. Okay, she replied. Just let me know when. I'll be here. I always will be. He nodded again, more to himself than to her. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby, more than you'll ever know. They ended the call. The silence afterward wasn't heavy this time. It was still, honest, like a wound finally being cleaned, even if it still hurt. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Isaiah stepped in, holding 2 sodas and a paper bag with sandwiches. Did you call her? He asked. Ellis nodded. Yeah, and we talked. It wasn't easy. Isaiah offered him the bag. Neither is healing. They sat across from each other at the small motel table. 2 sandwiches, 2 drinks, 2 men finding their way back to each other. Bit by bit, word by word, truth by truth. The next morning came soft and unhurried. Sunlight filtered through the thin cotton curtains in Isaiah's small rental house, brushing the hardwood floor like a warm sigh. Birds chirped from the tree just outside the screen door. A lawnmower buzzed faintly somewhere down the street. Ellis Monroe stood barefoot in the kitchen, pouring cereal into a chipped white bowl. It was quiet here. Not the kind of quiet that echoed, but the kind that felt earned, lived in. He could hear Isaiah's footsteps creaking gently down the hall. Didn't think you'd be up this early, Isaiah said with a smile as he stepped into the kitchen, a navy t-shirt clinging to his frame. Coffee in hand. Didn't sleep much. Ellis replied, Your couch is nice, though. Isaiah chuckled. It's seen better days, but it hasn't let me down yet. They shared a quiet moment, the kind that said everything without needing to be filled. Isaiah moved toward the front porch, and Ellis followed, bowl in hand. The porch overlooked a modest front yard with a tired fence and 2 plastic chairs set up beneath a crooked awning. A porch swing creaked slightly in the breeze. Isaiah eased himself into it with his coffee, and Ellis took the chair beside him. They sat in silence for a while, watching as the neighborhood began to stir. A father and daughter walked past with a small dog. A mail truck idled a few doors down. Somewhere, someone was playing jazz softly from a backyard speaker. Isaiah looked out at the street. This used to be my aunt's house, he said. I lived here for a while after I left law. Took a long time for it to feel like home again. Ellis nodded. It feels steady. Steady's a good word, Isaiah said. Takes work, though, and time. Ellis stirred the cereal in his bowl. How long did it take before you weren't angry anymore? Isaiah glanced at him, then back toward the trees. I don't know if I ever stopped being angry, he said, but I got tired of letting it decide who I became. Ellis let that sit. I still don't know where to put all this, he admitted. The past, the lies, the feelings. You don't have to put them anywhere yet, Isaiah said gently. Let them move through you, like a storm. Some things aren't meant to be packed up, just survived. They sat quietly again, the swing creaking slowly with the breeze. Then Isaiah asked, Do you remember when you first learned to read? Ellis blinked. What, just curious, Isaiah said. I missed a lot. Remember, I want to hear the details. Ellis thought for a moment. Kindergarten, he said slowly. There was this big book about trains. I used to carry it everywhere. I think I memorized the whole thing before I could actually read the words. Isaiah smiled. That tracks. Ellis chuckled. Was that a train pun? Absolutely, Isaiah said, grinning. Ellis laughed harder than he expected. The sound caught him by surprise. It felt good. Not like a full repair, but like a small break in the clouds. Isaiah leaned back. I used to imagine teaching you chess, showing you how to fix a screen door, telling you all the mistakes I made so you wouldn't have to repeat them. Ellis turned to him. You still can. Isaiah didn't say anything at first. He just blinked a few times and gave a nod that was more emotional than words could have managed. They sat there a while longer, time moving slowly. Eventually, Ellis stood. Can I see some pictures, he asked. From before Isaiah lit up? Yeah, of course. They went inside, and Isaiah pulled a small wooden box from the top of a closet. Inside were faded photographs, a few old Polaroids, some legal documents, and a torn newspaper clipping about a young civil rights lawyer filing a landmark housing case. Ellis sifted through them. There was a photo of Isaiah at 28, standing on the steps of a courthouse, fist raised beside a group of clients. Another of him in a hospital room, holding newborn Ellis with Simone, sitting tired but smiling beside him. Ellis stared at that one the longest. That's your mother, Isaiah said softly. Before the world hardened her. She was happy, Ellis whispered. She was powerful, Isaiah corrected, and scared, like we all were. Ellis touched the edge of the photo, careful not to smudge it. I don't know how to forgive her, he said, but I'm starting to understand her. Isaiah nodded. That's a beginning. They spent the rest of the morning going through the box. Old letters, receipts from road trips, a mixtape Isaiah once made titled, For Simone. Even when you're mad at me. Ellis held that one up. She ever listened to this? Isaiah smiled sadly. She threw it at me once. Ellis burst out laughing. Okay, that tracks. They were different. Ellis and Isaiah, but the more they spoke, the more threads he saw between them, in the way they used humor to cushion pain, in their shared habit of folding their hands the same way when they were thinking, even in the softness of their voice when something really mattered. By afternoon, the sunlight had shifted across the porch again. Geneva returned with groceries and a warm hug. She didn't ask what they talked about. She didn't need to. Over dinner, they sat like a family, uneven, bruised, but present. And that night, when Ellis lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above, he felt something new inside him. Not resolution, not forgiveness, but trust, thin and fragile like thread. But there, The morning sun glinted off the windshield of the rental car as Isaiah pulled into the drop-off lane at Charlotte Douglas Airport. Inside, the terminal bustled with life families lining up with strollers, businessmen checking their watches, and flight attendants rolling sleek carry-ons past security. Ellis Monroe sat in the passenger seat, hands folded in his lap, watching the slow movement of the crowds ahead. He was going back to Minneapolis, back to the woman who raised him, back to the memories that now felt heavier with truth, back to the house that suddenly held more silence than comfort. He didn't know what he would say when he walked through the front door. He only knew that avoiding it any longer felt like choosing to stay lost. Isaiah looked over at him. "You sure?" Ellis nodded, then glanced out at the terminal again. "I need to—" Isaiah gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, then loosened his fingers. "You can always come back. You know that, right?" Ellis looked at him. "You mean that, with everything I have," Isaiah said, "my door's always open, whether it's for a day or forever?" Ellis managed a small smile. "That means more than you know." There was a moment of quiet. Then Isaiah reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small envelope. It was sealed with handwriting Ellis didn't recognize. "What's this?" Ellis asked, taking it carefully. Isaiah tapped the top of the envelope. "From your grandmother. She asked me to give it to you on the way out." Ellis turned it over in his hands. He'd open it later, maybe on the flight, maybe when he was ready. Isaiah stepped out and opened the trunk, pulling out Ellis's duffel bag. It was light, just a few clothes and the weight of everything he'd learned in the last 2 days. At the curb, Isaiah stood beside him. They didn't rush goodbye. "Can I ask you something?" Ellis said, adjusting the strap on his bag. "Of course. If I had never gotten on that flight, would you have waited forever?" Isaiah took a breath. "I think I already was." Ellis looked at him, heart full of something too big for words. He opened his arms, and for the first time in 15 years, they hugged. It wasn't perfect. It was hesitant at first, but then it deepened. A son, a father, holding the space between them with everything words couldn't fix. "When they let go," Isaiah said. "Call me when you land." Ellis nodded. "I will. Text me before takeoff." "You're getting clingy now," Ellis said with a smirk. Isaiah laughed, and for the first time, it didn't feel strange. It felt right. Ellis turned and walked into the terminal, step by step, steady. The lines moved slowly. Security felt longer than usual, but Ellis didn't fidget. He kept the envelope from Geneva tucked safely into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out the ticket Isaiah had bought for him online the night before. He boarded BlueHarbor Air Flight 45117 back to Minneapolis. As he found his seat 13A by the window, he stared out at the runway, the blue sky above, and the hazy clouds on the horizon. He could feel the fear in his chest. Not the fear of flying, but the fear of what came next. He pulled out the envelope and carefully opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. On it was Geneva's handwriting, Ellis. Sometimes the truth waits quietly in the wings. For the moment a heart is ready to receive it. That moment is never loud. It's often small, like a whisper inside your chest that says, "Ask, you asked, and now you're finding your own way through the answers." I know you may not know what to do with all this yet, and that's okay. Truth isn't a demand, it's an invitation. You are loved by your father, by your mother, by me. Let that be your compass, even if the map is still unclear. Love always. Geneva Ellis folded the letter slowly. He let out a breath that had been sitting in his lungs since Charlotte. He didn't cry, but he felt something shift inside. As the plane took off, he pressed his head gently to the window. The earth fell away beneath him. The sky opened wide, and Ellis, for the first time in his life, didn't feel like a passenger. He felt like he was finally holding the wheel. The flight was quiet. No grand gestures, no poetic announcements, just clouds, light turbulence, and a boy finding his way back to a life that was waiting for him to see it clearly. When the wheels touched down in Minneapolis, it was late afternoon. The familiar gray of the Midwest hugged the runway. The trees looked the same. So did the skyline. But Ellis didn't. As he stepped off the plane, duffel in hand, he checked his phone. A text from Simone waited. "Let me know when you land. I'll be waiting." He hesitated, then typed back, "Just landed. Walking out now." His feet moved slowly toward the arrivals gate, toward the woman who had raised him, toward the questions that hadn't been answered yet, but also toward healing. Not the kind that erased the past, the kind that simply made room for a future. The taxi rolled to a slow stop in front of the Monroe house just after sunset. The sky above Minneapolis was painted in streaks of lavender and dusky gold, the air cool and still. The quiet suburban street looked exactly as Ellis remembered, the same cracked sidewalk, the same mailbox his mother once painted. Navy blue. The porch light was on. He hesitated for a long moment in the back seat before the driver gave a polite cough. "You good?" Kid Ellis blinked and nodded. "Yeah, thanks." He paid in cash, then stepped out, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his legs heavy. The taxi pulled away, tires whispering across the pavement, leaving him alone with the stillness of home. The porch steps creaked under his feet. Before he could knock, the door opened. Dr. Simone Monroe stood in the threshold, dressed in soft gray sweats, her hair pulled into a bun, and her face full of quiet fear and hope. Her eyes moved quickly across his face, as if checking whether time had reshaped him in the span of a weekend. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ellis stood still for a beat before speaking. "Hey." Neither moved to hug. She stepped aside and let him in. The house smelled like lemon oil and the chili she always made on Sundays. Familiar. Too familiar. Ellis walked through the living room slowly, letting his fingers trail across the top of the couch. It looked smaller. Or maybe he had just grown up faster than the furniture did. "You hungry?" Simone asked from the kitchen doorway. "I made your favorite." "I'm okay," he replied. "Thanks." She nodded and stepped in. He stayed behind, staring at the wall of photos in the hallway. Him as a toddler. Him in a Halloween costume. Him holding a trophy. Always him. Never them. She came back holding 2 mugs. "Chamomile," she said. "Still like it." Ellis took it with a quiet nod. "Yeah." They sat down at the dining table in silence. The clock on the wall ticked gently above them. It was Simone who broke the quiet. "Did he tell you everything?" Ellis looked up. "He told me what I needed to know." She folded her hands. "Did he blame me?" "No," Ellis said. "He took responsibility, but he also never stopped looking for me." Simone lowered her gaze. "I didn't tell you because I was scared, but also because I was ashamed. I made a choice I thought was right in the moment, then I buried it, and buried it again every year after." Ellis let her speak. "I lied to you," she continued, "and worse. I didn't prepare for the day that lie might unravel. I always thought I had more time." He took a slow sip from the mug. "I thought I knew you," he said. "But now I don't know what parts of you were real and what parts were curated." She winced at the word. "That's fair," she said. "You have every right to feel that." "I'm not here to punish you," Ellis added. "I just need to start over. On my own terms." She reached for his hand, but stopped halfway. "I miss when you were little," she whispered. "Not because I want to hold you back, but because it was the last time I didn't feel like I was losing you." Ellis blinked hard. "I've never wanted to leave you behind," he said. "But I can't stay in a version of this house where truth doesn't live." She nodded slowly. "I'm trying, Ellis. I really am. If you'll let me, I want to rebuild with you." There was something raw and trembling in her voice. Not just fear, but humility. Ellis leaned back. "I'm not ready to come home the way I left. That version of me died a little this weekend." She closed her eyes for a moment. "Then let's meet the new you together." Silence filled the space again. Not uncomfortable this time, just fragile. He pulled the letter from Geneva out of his pocket and slid it across the table. "She said truth is an invitation." Simone touched the envelope, her eyes misting. "She's wiser than me." She waited. Ellis said, "And she didn't push. Just opened the door." Simone's voice shook. "Then I'll do the same." He nodded and looked out the window. The street lamp outside had flickered on, casting a soft halo over the driveway. "She invited me to come visit next month," Ellis said. "She said she wants to teach me how to make sweet potato pie." Simone gave a soft laugh through her tears. "She makes it better than me. Don't tell her I said that." Ellis smiled faintly. "I might stay a few days longer next time," he said carefully. "See where my dad works. Just get to know the pieces I never had." Simone nodded. "You should." He stood slowly. "I'm going to bed. Long day." She stood too. "There's fresh sheets on your bed. Same room, if you want it." He gave a quiet thanks, then paused before heading down the hall. She called after him gently, "Ellis." He turned back. "Whatever happens next, I'm proud of who you are." He didn't respond with words. He just gave her a look that said, "I hear you. I'm still deciding what to do with it." Then he disappeared down the hallway. The next morning, he woke up early. He stood at the front window watching the sun rise over the neighborhood. The lawn shimmered with dew. The world looked normal again. But he wasn't, and that was okay. He pulled out his phone and opened a blank text. He typed slowly, "Hey, Dad, I got home safe. Thanks for everything. I'm glad I met you. I want to talk again soon." He stared at the message, then hit send. No punctuation, no signature, just presence. It buzzed seconds later with a reply. "I'm here. Always. One step at a time." Ellis smiled. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew it had room now. For truth, for healing, for both his parents flawed, afraid, human, and most importantly, for him. He stepped outside into the driveway, feeling the air on his face. Everything had changed, and yet, for the first time, it all felt like it was finally beginning. Sometimes, it takes just one moment, one seat, one note, one conversation to unearth the truths we've buried deep. Ellis Monroe's story reminds us that family isn't just about biology, it's about courage. It's about facing the lies we tell to protect and choosing to build something stronger on the other side of pain. But it also reminds us of something darker that assumptions, silence, and systemic bias still shape how some lives are valued and how others are ignored. Every child deserves to know where they come from. Every parent deserves the chance to be better. And every voice, especially those silenced by race, by fear, by circumstance, deserves to be heard. Let this story stir something in you. Let it call out the quiet injustices we too often overlook. And if it moved you, even just a little, like, share, and subscribe to this channel, because the next story might just be yours, and we'll be here, ready to tell it.